While Australians fight over 10,000 kilometres of power lines cutting through farmland, a deeper, more fundamental battle is quietly underway. And that battle is striking at the heart of whether families can survive through the next drought. And believe me when I say it, at least in my area, that drought's already started. What am I talking about? Well, water, of course. G'day, I'm Rob, and in this episode of Off the Land, today we're going to look into the water rights and Section 100 of the Australian Constitution. And we're going to ask the question, who owns the rain that falls on your property? Hollywood has made many movies about water. Mad Max Fury Road, for instance. But this is real life water wars. And for most Australians, post-settlement history, water rights, they were just tied to the land. And if you owned land, you had reasonable access to the water that was on it. In the 1980s and the 90s, that changed. Governments began unbundling water from land and separating it so the water could be traded as its own asset. What started as a way to create water markets has, according to many farmers, been the beginning of a slow taking of control over water that used to just come, with the dirt that was under your boots on any farm. And to be brutally honest, it was the beginning of the sell-off to foreign investors. So I don't understand why we needed this water license separation, but I'm pretty sure that answers the question. Anyway, this brings us to the centre of this whole argument and the whole issue about water in Australia. Section 100 of the Australian Constitution. Section 100 clearly states, and I'm going to read it here, the Commonwealth shall not, by any law, regulation or trade of commerce, abridge the right of a state or the residents therein to the reasonable use of water of the rivers for conservation and irrigation. Shall not be abridged. Those words are not very ambiguous. The Constitution was written to protect the reasonable use of river water for farming, storing water and irrigation. Exactly what regional producers need to survive in a land of floods and droughts. And our forefathers knew about the droughts, obviously, and knew they had to protect food security. The current governments have forgotten this, and every new layer of federal and state rules, basin plans, trading schemes, buybacks, restrictions of allocations, the very idea of allocations, they all increasingly look like an abridgment of that rule. And it's a clear constitutional protection that they're breaching. So if the Commonwealth can't use trade and commerce powers to limit those rights, why do so many of the new rules and regulations feel like they're doing exactly that? And for those of you that are going to say, most of the water is managed by the states. Well, yeah, you're right. But if you were to read Section 109 of the Constitution, it says when a law of a state is inconsistent with the law of the Commonwealth, the latter shall prevail, and the former, to the extent of the inconsistency, be invalid. So the Australian Constitution obviously trumps state law. Well, as a matter of fact, go and talk to your federal member and he'll give you one of these booklets. It's the Australian Constitution in pocket form. That's where I had those sections come from that I've just read to you. And everyone should have a copy of this, so you just know what the government can and can't do to you. Back in the late 80s and 90s, this unbundling started, where they were separating the land from the water. It started in about 1983 in South Australia, just after the big drought that we had then. And New South Wales and Victoria did their separating in 1994 following the 94 COAG water reform framework. It was sort of a federal thing at that point. The main argument for this water reform was the Murray-Darling system. And that starts in Queensland, makes its way all the way down, and basically pretty much all of the water from the Great Divide empties into the Darling River. It meets the Murray River down on the sort of the big border there. And then it travels through the Victoria into South Australia and empties out beyond the barges in South Australia. Everyone along this system takes water for irrigation. And it was decided that poor South Australia were missing out because there was nothing left by the time all the Queensland, New South Wales, Victorian irrigators took their cup. There was nothing left to fill Lake Alexandrina, which is a man-made lake in South Australia that the desert of South Australia irrigates from. So before all of that happened, first up, the New South Wales government, they made district water plans coming out of that 94 COAG. Ours, being the Peel Valley, was the Peel Water Sharing Plan, and we were promised that the plan would last 15 years and give us irrigators certainty of supply and of laws, so we could plan, invest, knowing that our money wasn't going to be wasted by, someone saying, well, you can't irrigate anymore after you've just spent $1 million on kit. But within a year, the Murray-Darling Basin Authority was formed by the federal government. I think it was John Howard back then. It was a federal initiative, and that overwrote every promise made by the New South Wales government. 15-year guarantee lasted less than a year. Oh well, and that's what many farmers saw as a steady erosion of our practical water rights. Because in it we got sustainable diversion limits for the environment. We got water buybacks. Yeah, they sort of came to you and said, we're going to take your water. The MDBA, Murray-Darling Basin Authority, they even gloat on their website that they've currently recovered 1,200 gigalitres of water. That's 1.2 trillion litres of water that they've recovered. Isn't recovered a wonderful word? For them it means taken back. For us it means taken from. What that really means is 1.2 trillion litres of water has been removed from agriculture so far. So we've got tighter rules on when you can have the water, how much you can capture, how much you can store, and how much you can actually use. And they're redefining what counts as a watercourse. Overland flow in times of flood, like the Cobby Station debacle. That's now, floodplains are now part of the watercourse. Or, look, I can go on and on and on and on. Anyway, the new water rules, they've reduced water available for irrigators in districts all the way from Queensland to Adelaide. So tell me down here if you think that that has abridged the rights of farmers to reasonable amounts of water for irrigation. Along with just irrigating out of the rivers, old dams, runoff capture, so river dams, river soaks, diversions into inland dams that have been around for generations, like we're talking, hand dug stuff in 1900, have all been caught up in this new system, and they're now requesting licensing, and you have to apply for harvesting rights, and you're getting harvestable right caps on what you can do, and of course compliance checks. So the result is farmers are told by the government that they can't or won't help us drought proof our farms, while the rules make it harder and more expensive to build or maintain those water infrastructure things that we need. In the description, there's a bunch of links to the Basin Plan impacts, ABARES reports, MDBA projects, the COAG water reform. Yeah, if you're interested, go and look those things up. But here on the ground, it gets really practical. The government is starting to claim ownership over all the water in the natural water course on my farm, whether it's lakes or depressions. Everywhere from a lake to a depression in the ground is now defined in law. So here is a topographical map. The blue lines on that map represent the water. You can see where I've numbered them 1 and beyond. So number 1's are small water courses, and we're allowed to dam those if it's a suitable spot to dam them. Where a 1 joins a 2, where 2 1s join, that becomes a level 2 creek. We're allowed to dam those, but there's a lot more rules. But where 2 2s join, that becomes a level 3 creek. I'm not allowed to touch that anymore. So if I was to build a dam, it has to be in that probably higher country where I'm allowed to build dams, because that's where 1 and 2 level creeks live. There's 2 levels above this, obviously levels 4 and level 5. I mean, the Murray River being a level 5 river. And obviously there's no farms ever going to be allowed to dam the Murray River. But in New South Wales, harvestable rights allow you to catch a limited amount of the runoff off your farm. But those limits are just based on formulas that often don't match the reality of the land. Essentially, we're allowed to harvest 10% of the water runoff. So if all of the rain that runs, once it starts filling a creek, I'm allowed to harvest 10% of that part, the part that's actually going to run down the creek. But only in dams, obviously in level 1 or level 2 areas. So in a good year, if a dams are already at 100%, obviously 100% of the water runs past. In a normal year where dams are at say 60 or 70%, I can now take about 4% of my runoff, and I have to let the other 6% go past because my dams will be full at that point. So we're not allowed, we'll never actually be allowed to take our 10% unless, like we had a few years ago when we had the droughts and there wasn't a dam left with any water in it. And that was probably the first time I went close to harvesting anywhere near my allowable water supply. And then of course the next problem is you build or enlarge a dam in the wrong spot and you're risking, not only stop work orders, but massive fines and the costs of removal of that dam plus rehabilitation costs of any damage it's caused. So all of this is just directly affecting what farmers can do to conserve our water. I mean, we're told prep for drought, but how do you do that? I mean, every dry period, the message from the government is, be prepared, drought-proof your land. Yet the same system makes it slow, expensive, or just full-on impossible to increase our storage without jumping through approvals, engineering, environmental studies, and heaps of cash. Meanwhile, these same government departments, their compliance has gone ultra high-tech. The Natural Resource Access Regulator, the NRA, is a New South Wales body that looks after that water. There's similar things in all the states, but they're currently using satellite imagery, drones, and metering, that every pump's now going to have a meter on it, for usage, and their precision is pretty good these days about how much water we're actually using. So what used to be a local matter is now under constant overhead surveillance by somebody, and we obviously can't get away with absolutely anything. And let's add in the rise of AI. So NRA and those sort of people, they've even removed people from this equation. AI is now looking at photos from last year, this year, 3 months ago, and they're deciding whether an infraction has been made, and they're spitting out list of offenders that just get sent fines. Here's a couple of photographs from that. The first one is, of course, NRA boasting that they now use this technology, and poor bloke over here who actually got done by this technology on a ABC story. If you're not new to the channel and you've watched my story about Energy Co and the transmission lines they wanted to build through my property, I did some math, and it was millions of dollars of loss that's either they're going to lose or have to pay if that project went ahead. But that's nothing, because losing reliable access to water will strike at the viability of the property. If you don't have water, we can't do anything. I mean, if I don't have water, I can't have stock, I can't crop. And in a drought, I mean, it's just game over. Just pack up and go somewhere else. So if Section 100 means the Commonwealth shall not abridge reasonable use for conservation or irrigation, then every rule that does so needs to be examined against that rule. And I'm not sure it does. It's not an obscure clause. It's clear constitutional guarantee for farmers. So the question is, are current water rules through the MDBA framework respecting that shall not be abridged protection? Or are they just out eroding our water rights that used to come with the land? Tell me what's happening on your property. Have you had any licensing issues? Have you been struggling to build a dam? Have you been hit with new compliance restrictions or compliance issues? Tell me, and we'll try to look into them. So share your experiences in the comments. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. If you're not a farmer and you've never heard about any of this before, tell me what you really think. And if it matters to you, please share this video, like, subscribe, do all the usual things, hype it if you can. Consider buying me a coffee or looking at my membership page. Subscribe, hit the bell, so you get your message straight to your inbox, so we can help cover these fights that are affecting boots on the ground producers. In the description are a few resources you might like to go to. They aren't links, but paste and copy and go into Google. If I can do that, anybody can. But also in the description are actual links to the camera gear, microphones, lighting I use to make this podcast. I'm not actually sponsored by anybody, so I can't offer you any discounts. But I am an Amazon affiliate, and I may get a commission if you purchase something off that link. But as per usual, thanks for watching. Stay independent, look after your water, but most of all, be safe out there. Thanks for watching.